American Browning versus Hitler's Buzzsaw. The darkest battle of WW2 revealed at midnight. The moon hung low over the battle-scarred fields of Europe, an eerie witness to the horrors unfolding beneath its glow. In the dead of night, a thunderous roar filled the air, the kind that made hearts race and skin prickle. Soldiers whispered of a chilling encounter: an American Browning machine gun, once a symbol of hope, pitted against Hitler's terrifying Buzzsaw, a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Reports of the Buzzsaw sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened warriors, its name alone evoking images of carnage and despair. No one knew what awaited them in that dark hour, but the tension in the air was palpable. Was it the dawn of defeat or the flicker of triumph? As the ground trembled underfoot, tales of the Buzzsaw spread like wildfire through the ranks. It was said to slice through steel like butter, leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. Curiously, witnesses claimed that its very sound was hypnotic, a metallic hum that called out to soldiers like a siren. Those who survived the initial wave spoke of a gaping maw of destruction, a swirling blizzard of bullets that created a hellish landscape. The Browning, a steadfast protector, seemed to embody the spirit of those brave enough to wield it. And yet, as each second ticked by, the darkness grew thicker, wrapping tightly around their resolve. Then came the whispers of a strange phenomenon that accompanied the Buzzsaw, a foul mist that crept in just before its strikes. Soldiers reported seeing shadowy figures within the cloud, almost human, yet distinctly not. Horrified glances were exchanged as friends turned foes in a fleeting moment of panic. The sound of metal clashing against metal roared within their ears, drowning out the rising fear. They were caught in a battle beyond anything they could have imagined, where every minute felt like a lifetime, and every breath tasted of ash and dread. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Just then, a piercing scream shattered the night, emanating from the heart of the battle. Panic spread through the ranks like wildfire as the shadows began to shift, twisting and swirling with an unnatural energy. Silence fell for one heart-stopping moment. Was it the calm before the storm or a sign of something terrible? The Browning's powerful rhythm began to sputter. A battle cry echoed in desperate defiance against the encroaching darkness. Every soldier felt the dread seep into their bones. The ground was alive with torment, and there seemed to be no escape with the darkness pressing ever closer. The Browning's last stand seemed inevitable. Would it be enough to turn the tide against the relentless onslaught of the Buzzsaw? Or would this fateful encounter end in tragedy, lost to the ages, swallowed by the shadows? All they could do was brace themselves and hope. The air crackled with anticipation, like the moments before a lightning strike. One soldier, Private Jake Thompson, steadied his grip on the Browning. His heart raced as he licked his dry lips, glancing to his left and right, seeking reassurance in the eyes of his comrades. They were all young, barely out of their teens, yet here, under the moon's glaring eye, they were forced to confront nightmares born from the war. The foreboding mist rolled in, thickening the air around them, and Jake felt a shiver crawl down his spine. Faces turned solemn. The laughter and banter that had once echoed through the camp had crumbled to fearful silence. Shadows danced within the fog, their movements slick and sinister. Each soldier sensed it. The Buzzsaw was near. Suddenly, the metallic hum pierced the tranquility, rising to a crescendo that drowned out even the thudding of hearts. It was hypnotic, just as they had warned. Fear began to twist Jake's stomach. He aimed the Browning at the source of the sound, trying to pierce the haze for a glimpse of the nightmare ahead, but the darkness swallowed everything. "Hold steady," shouted Sergeant Miller, his voice booming but trembling. He clenched his teeth, the resolve of a seasoned leader strained under the weight of impending doom. For a moment the world was eerily quiet. Then it happened. A blinding flash illuminated the battlefield as the Buzzsaw unleashed its fury. A wave of bullets shot through the murk like staccato thunder, ripping into the earth and sending shrapnel flying. The Browning belted out a fierce response, but Jake's hands shook violently. "Fire! Fire!" screamed Sergeant Miller, and the men opened up, the Browning roaring defiantly against an unseen threat. It was chaos. Shells crunched underfoot as soldiers fell and rose again, their screams merging into a cacophony that drowned out even the Buzzsaw. Jake's mind whirred. Every pull of the trigger felt like a desperate plea for survival. He could see flashes of movement through the mist, twisted shapes emerging and disappearing almost instantly. Were they real? Were they ghosts? It was impossible to tell. Another soldier fell to his left, a jagged scream escaping his lips, and Jake's heart clenched. They were all in danger, and the Browning felt like a fragile barrier against the encroaching void through the chaos. He caught sight of movement at the edge of the fog, a silhouette, tall and grotesque, its outline morphing as if it were part of the mist itself. Every instinct screamed at him to look away, yet something drew him in, a pull he couldn't resist. The figure moved with a fluidity that felt wrong, inhuman. And then, it turned to him, revealing a face that was both horrifyingly familiar and eerily alien. Without warning, the scream hit his ears again, ripping through the din, a voice that twisted something deep inside him. It was a sound that spoke of betrayal, as if one of his own had turned against him. But that couldn't be. He had to stay focused. "Jake!" It was Sergeant Miller's voice, cutting through the fog, calling him back from the clutches of disorientation. "Don't let it get to you. We need you." With renewed purpose, Jake steadied his aim again, but a creeping despair gnawed at him. How could they defeat an enemy shrouded in mystery, fear, and possibly darkness itself? Just then, the Browning clicked ominously. Had they run out of ammunition? Panic surged within him. The fog thickened, pressing in, and as the Buzzsaw continued its murderous symphony, Jake could only wonder if this was the moment he'd witness the end, not just for himself, but for the very flicker of hope they all clung to. What would they face next? An overwhelming force that no gun could stop? Or something even more sinister? The desperate thought loomed as the mist began to swirl violently around them. A storm brewing beneath the moonlit sky. The mist swirled like a tempest, choking the air and pulling Jake deeper into a nightmarish grip. He could feel the fear festering among the men, paralyzing, consuming. The Browning lay cold in his hands, a dead weight as the sound of the Buzzsaw echoed through the void. All his training screamed for action, yet he felt captive, suspended in a moment that stretched like the shadows around him. Jake glanced at his comrades, young men etched with terror, their faces ghostly pale in the phosphorescent glow of the moon. Their eyes darted in all directions, seeking safety but finding none. One by one, they faltered, like moths drawn too close to a flame. The reality hit him like a punch to the gut. This was not a simulation. They were staring death in the face. Just then, from the depth of the fog, a figure emerged, silhouetted in the faint light. Its wounds were deep, gnarled fingers outstretched as if pleading for release. Jake's breath hitched. The figure drew closer, its movements infernal, gliding through the mist with an unnatural grace. Was it a soldier, or something worse? "Jake!" a voice shouted, shattering the silence like glass. It was Colin, his closest friend. "They're all around us. We can't hold them off." Colin's eyes were wild, filled with a madness that instantly flooded Jake's veins with dread. "No, stay focused," Jake shouted back, feeling the tremor in his own voice. He had to believe they could stop this. But as the Buzzsaw roared again, the sound vibrating through his bones, Jake felt the ground shake beneath him. A ripple of fear ran through the ranks. "Make a line," Sergeant Miller commanded, though his voice betrayed the panic simmering under the surface. Jake squared his shoulders. They couldn't afford to break. "Everyone, stay together," he yelled. One by one, his comrades turned with uncertainty, but something ignited in their eyes, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps sheer survival instinct. They raised their weapons, each man reflecting an unyielding resolve. Then, with a shuddering gasp, the fog parted momentarily, revealing a chaotic tableau of horrors. Shapes of twisted bodies, their features masked in shadows. Were these the souls of those lost before them or foes awaiting their command? Another blast echoed, and the buzz intensified. Soldiers fell, their screams punctuating the night, as if the very air clamored for torment. Jake's instincts kicked into high gear. He needed to act. He scrambled, trying to reload the Browning, but the cruel reality settled and the magazine lay empty. "Jake!" Colin shouted, desperation weaving through his tone. "What are we going to do?" The encroaching fog thickened dangerously, swallowing their sound and their sanity. I don't know." Panic clawed at Jake's throat, his mind racing. He was out of options, teetering on the edge of despair. Suddenly, a guttural roar ruptured the silence, and in that dreadful moment, all eyes turned toward the darkness closing in around them. It felt as if the mist itself had taken form, a malevolent entity eager to snuff out the last flickers of hope. "Run!" Someone shouted, and the command sliced through the air like a knife, shattering their fragile stand. The soldiers dove for cover, but there was nowhere to hide from the penetrating gaze of the fog. Jake hesitated, heart hammering in his chest. Could he really abandon the fight? But he felt the world around him shift, shadows twisting into grotesque figures. The mist receded just enough for him to glimpse it again, the hideous face from before, now grinning wider, leaving no doubt it was hunting him. As he turned to flee, another blood-curdling scream cut through the voice of the buzzsaw, reverberating like thunder. Would they survive the onslaught of terror? Or was this the end of everything they had fought for? The answer loomed like the cursed fog, hanging overhead like an executioner's blade. Just before the darkness engulfed him wholly, Jake vowed to fight back. Whatever it took, he would not go down without a battle. But would it be enough against the horrors that lay ahead? As the mist surged, like a living thing, Jake realized the fight had only just begun. Jake's body reacted on instinct. He sprinted forward, the ache in his legs fading beneath the rush of adrenaline. Colin was at his side, eyes wide, mouth moving in a silent scream, as chaotic movements surrounded them. The world became a blur of shadows and noise, punctuated by the ghastly echoes of the buzzsaw. "Stick to the trees," Jake shouted, veering toward the gnarled silhouettes breaking through the mist. The ancient trunks looked like twisted sentinels, their bark peeling as if shedding a skin. He could taste the tang of fear in the air, thick and metallic, just as panic clawed at his insides. But then he saw it, a glint of brass nestled among the roots of a tree. His empty magazine. He dove toward it, heart racing, fingers wrapping around the cool metal. "Jake, move!" Colin screamed, tugging at his arm. The shape from the fog surged closer, extending its bony fingers. With a terror-stricken glance, Jake saw its face flicker into view, hollow eyes, a smile that split the darkness. It wasn't he just hunting him. It was feeding off their fear, an ancient predator evolved for this moment. Jake drew back instinctively, but Colin was already pulling him up. "We have to go now." They bolted into the tree-line, the laughter of the shadowy figure bubbling behind them, a horrific melody against the backdrop of pounding heartbeats. Trees swayed as the fog pressed forward, a cloud intent on devouring whatever hope remained. Jake's blood roared in his ears as the whispers grew louder. "Where are they?" Colin gasped, glancing every which way. Their sanctuary of twisted bark felt more like a pit of despair. "They need us," Jake gasped, his lungs burning. A flicker of hope ignited within him, bolstered by thoughts of his friends. "We've got to regroup and fight back." But the forest felt alive, whispering dark promises, as if it were in league with the horrors from the mist. Shadows shifted in ways that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. Each step felt like a descent into a deeper nightmare. "Look!" Colin shouted. The mist parted ahead, revealing a clearing that pulsated with a sinister light. Figures moved through the fog, soldiers, lost souls, their faces contorted with anguish. "No!" Jake raged, rage flaring up unbidden. "We can't let them win." They stumbled into the clearing, and Jake's throat tightened. The specters spun around, their faces all too familiar, their fallen brothers caught in endless torment. "Jake?" one called out, the voice breaking like glass. It was Davis, his buddy from basic training. Jake's heart twisted painfully at the sight, the ghostly figure reaching out as if begging for salvation. "Come back to us," another cried, echoing the desperation. They were trapped, caught between the living and the dead, where pain settled like a suffocating fog. "It's a trap," Colin yelled, pulling Jake back, but their resolve wavered, the past crashing against their present. The fears, the guilt. But then he remembered the Browning clasped in his hands, tangible, real. "This isn't over," he shouted, rallying his strength. "They're just shadows. We have to fight." A spine-chilling roar erupted from the darkness, cutting through the despair, the buzzsaw echoing its hellish challenge. Jake knew then that they were not just fighting for survival. They were confronting their very nightmares. "Form up. We're getting out," Jake called, his voice piercing through the saturated air. Mustering any confidence, he stepped toward the spectral soldiers, holding his ground against the howling winds of their rage. But could they really bridge the gap between life and death? As the horrific laughter grew louder, Jake felt a chilling realization wash over him. They weren't alone, not just in spirit, but out there in the mist something else was waiting. Something that had been watching them all along. Would this night lead them to their salvation or damnation? The fog shifted ominously, and Jake understood that the worst was yet to come. How could they break the cycle if the very fabric of their reality was woven with despair? In the shadows, the true horror was just beginning to unfold. The moment was surreal. The fog crept closer, as if wrapped in some ancient curse. The faces of their fallen brothers shimmered, flickering like dying embers. Shadows coiled around Jake and Colin, urging them to lend an ear to the unsettling whispers that promised release. "Do you feel it?" Jake said, voice cracking as he glanced at his friend. "They want us to join them." Colin shivered, shaking his head violently. "We can't. No, we won't." But even as he spoke it, doubt played in his eyes, the edges of their resolve fraying. The laughter from the mist morphed into mocking chatter, echoing their deepest fears. "You're too late," they scoffed with voices that sounded like thunder rolling over the hilltops. "You're in the past now. This is where you belong." "Shut up," Jake shouted, raising the Browning as the weight of it felt like an anchor against the tide of despair. "We're alive, and we're fighting back." The taunts fell silent for a heartbeat, and the darkness held its breath as if considering his words. Then, with a rush, the air shifted again, weighty and sinister, pressing against them like a thick blanket. Jake could feel it then. Something was coming. It stirred unseen, a predator lurking just beyond his vision, teetering on the edge of reality. Colin pulled Jake back a step, his eyes wide with panic. Get ready for anything." The edge of the clearing shimmered, and a figure emerged from the heart of the fog. This one was not a specter wreathed in whispers of sorrow. It was solid, a hulking mass that oozed malevolence. Jake felt his stomach drop. That it stood 2 heads taller than any man, clad in leather armor that gleamed in the eerie light. The Buzzsaw's metallic frame rippled as it moved, blades glinting like fangs in the night. Colin and Jake exchanged a swift glance, and in that shared fear, they understood. This was the embodiment of everything that had hunted them. "Foolish children," it roared, voice a rumble that sent tremors through the ground beneath them. "You think you can defeat what you cannot comprehend?" Jake's grip tightened on the Browning, heart hammering in his chest. "We can't be afraid. Not now." Suddenly, with a bellowing laugh that sliced through the air, the buzzsaw lunged forward, blades whirling in a dizzying dance of death. Jake and Colin stumbled backward, feet scrambling on uneven ground as they dodged the furious assault. "Form up. Now," Jake shouted, breaking into a sprint toward the remnants of their fallen brothers. The ghostly soldiers had stood frozen. Perhaps they were trapped as well, caught between realms, waiting for a hero to lead them. "Together," Colin gasped, his breath ragged. Rounding the spectral ranks, Fear curled at the base of Jake's spine. Joining forces with these ethereal soldiers was both an act of bravery and a plunge into despair. Yet, in that moment, something shifted. The spirits began to glow, pulsing with a furious light that seemed to feed off the encroaching darkness. Jake's breath caught in his throat. Hope blossomed amidst the chaos. "Fight with us! Fight against him!" Jake yelled, feeling a gust of energy surge through him. The fallen soldier's pain intermingled with his own, and he grasped that they could unite against the madness that sought to take them all. The buzzsaw screeched in frustration as the light from the spirits waned and then flickered back stronger, like a fire fed by new fuel. For a moment, they were alive in a sea of horrific night, warriors grasping the strands of reality. Then, just as the tide seemed to turn, the fog reeled back, revealing a greater darkness beyond a swirling vortex that grasped at the edges of their reality, ready to swallow them whole. Not just him, Jake realized as panic rushed back. "There's something worse coming, and we have to face it," Colin shouted, racing towards Jake. Together, as the last of the fog dissipated, darkness surrounded them, and Jake felt every heartbeat thrum like a battle drum. They were on the verge of something monumental, faced with the stark choice between succumbing to despair or rising to fight. A shiver ran down Jake's spine. This battle could define everything for them, and for the countless lost souls that lingered in the shadows. Would they muster the will to confront the horror that stalked them? The truth loomed as the air slickened with despair. They had to confront not just the buzzsaw, but the terror woven into their own souls. As they prepared for the onslaught, Jake knew that this was only the beginning of an unimaginable confrontation, one that could either end their suffering or seal their doom once and for all. What waited in the dark, beyond the horizon of their fear? Would they embrace the fight, or would it consume them utterly? The air thickened around them, a palpable dread that made Jake's skin crawl. As the shadow loomed larger, the swirling vortex pulsed ominously like a heartbeat, echoing the relentless fear that gripped him. With every moment that passed, he felt the pull of the darkness, enticing them to submit to despair. "Focus!" Jake yelled, finding courage in the fire burning in Colin's eyes. He couldn't let his friend cave under the weight of it all. A bond fortified in battle needed to stand strong now. "We need to channel their strength. We can do this." Colin nodded, but the tremor in his hands told a different story. Their souls hung in a fragile balance, teetering between the flickering light of hope and the heavy grip of the abyss that beckoned. "Ghosts of the past, unite with us," Jake called out, voice steady despite the fear simmering within. The spirits flickered, pulses of light racing along their misty forms as they responded to the call, each whisper flowing with familiar pain and shared resolve. The buzzsaw halted, blades whirring to a menacing standstill. "Foolish children," it roared again, the ground rumbling beneath their feet. "You dare think you can harness this force? I will tear you apart." The creature lunged with a savage roar, a whirlwind of steel and fury aiming to shred the fragile unity of Jake and Colin. Instinct kicked in. Jake fired the Browning, the gun's blast ringing out like thunder. Bullets met the buzzsaw's armored chest with a painful clang, but it only seemed to fuel its rage. "Stay together. Don't break. We need to push forward," Jake shouted, adrenaline surging through him like wildfire. The soldiers' spectral forms surged beside them, shimmering with renewed vigor, their eerie expressions filled with the desire for revenge against their tormentor. The buzzsaw staggered for a moment, though its laughter boomed like an avalanche. "Pathetic. Your spirits are nothing but echoes of dreams long lost." It slashed forward, and the blades whirled with brutal momentum, slicing through the air. Jake ducked, adrenaline coursing through him. Colin, just beside him, stumbled but caught himself, their link unbroken. The soldiers surged forward, inspired by their unity, willing the energy to coalesce and challenge the monstrous foe. Suddenly, a piercing cry sliced through the din. A shimmering specter broke from the ranks, the form of a young soldier, eyes burning with purpose. "We fight for the forgotten. We fight for our freedom." His voice rang clear, shattering the oppressive dread. In that moment, the fog ignited, brilliant light pouring forth like the sun breaking through dark storm clouds. The haunted souls began to merge their essence, wrapping themselves around Colin and Jake, a human shield of memories and fury that surged with power against the encroaching darkness. The buzzsaw screeched, startled as the radiant lights clashed with its imposing form, forcing it back. "No! What is this? We can't let up!" Jake yelled, feeling the warmth of the spirits engulf him, his fear morphing into exhilarating strength. Together, they took a step toward the leather-clad giant, the air shimmering with echoes of hope. But then, with a monumental roar, a pressure wave erupted from the swirling vortex. The ground shook, knocking Jake and Colin off balance. The vortex expanded, threatening to claim its offerings, dragging the soldiers and their luminous unity toward the endless dark that threatened to envelop reality. "No, we're not ready to go," Colin screamed, grasping at the wisps of light as they flickered. Jake felt time slow, uncertainty crashing over them like waves threatening to drown, but somewhere inside, a fire ignited. They had to fight. As another roar ripped through the air, the buzzsaw lunged again, blades extending menacingly towards them. Jake could feel the darkness clawing at their backs and knew there was no going back now. They had to choose: be consumed by the void or cast it aside and push forward. Then, in the midst of the chaos, a sudden glimmer of realization hit Jake. This battle was about more than survival. It was about reclaiming the lives that had been stolen from them, about facing the deepest shadows of their souls, and confronting the dark mirror that loomed ahead. Together, he shouted one last time, fighting through the shadows that suffocated them, ready to embrace whatever came next. But what if the darkness was more than just a force to battle? What if it held the key to their past, to secrets neither dared to unearth? And as the blades of the buzzsaw descended once more, with the vortex yawning behind them, Jake realized that the darkest truths lay just beyond reach. Would they emerge heroes, or would they be lost in the fog forever? The world narrowed around Jake and Colin, the fierce roar of the buzzsaw drowning out all thoughts of escape. Every muscle in Jake's body screamed to move, to push against the encroaching fear and lay the blame for their suffering squarely on this twisted beast. With a flick of his wrist, Jake raised the Browning again, channeling every ounce of raw energy coursing through him into his next shot. The gun fired, echoing like a death knell through the smoky haze, the bullet striking true, but the giant just laughed. It was a soulless sound, a reminder that pain could be manufactured in monstrous ways. "Is that all you've got?" the buzzsaw mocked, blades glimmering like teeth in the dim light. The spirits rallied with renewed strength, their ethereal glow pulsing. But Jake could feel the desperation clawing at the edges of that light, a sickening reminder of the lives lost. "Step closer." It howled again, each word a threat that combined malice and power. The whole earth quaked beneath its fury, and a sudden wind swept past them, pulling violently toward the vortex. Colin's face twisted with sheer determination, and Jake felt a stirring of hope crawl back into his chest. The vortex pulsed and raged at their defiance, a living manifestation of all that had been torn away. Jake caught a glimpse of familiar faces among the swirling shadows, friends and comrades from a time of innocence long past. Their eyes seemed to scream for justice, and Jake's heart pounded with a potent mix of sorrow and rage. They weren't here to die. Not now. "Colin, look!" Jake shouted, his voice ringing above the chaos. He pointed to where the spectral soldiers flowed, gathering strength to pull the energy of their shared grief and fury. "They're fighting with us. We can't let their sacrifice be in vain." Colin swallowed hard, focusing on the ghostly figures that hovered just out of reach. Together, he whispered, rallying behind the words. The spirits surged, uniting in purpose. "Now!" Jake roared. They charged forward, a determined band against the looming threat, and the spirits melded into one fierce, muscular force. The buzzsaw's laughter turned into something more desperate as they advanced, the resonance in its blades cracking under that collective weight. A flash of light enveloped them as they collided head-on with the creature. An explosion of energy erupted, bright enough to blind. The dark vortex bucked violently, every shadow drawn toward the clashing force of light that threatened to snuff out its grasp. But just as victory seemed within reach, Jake felt an icy grip wrapping around his heart. The buzzsaw jerked, its form twisting like a predator cornered. "You think you can claim the light?" It snarled, the air thick with malevolence. "You haven't even begun to understand the darkness you face." The ground trembled beneath their feet as the monster began to shift, its armor transforming. Blades elongated and twisted, morphing into grotesque shapes that reeked of death. The soldiers' whispers turned to frantic cries, echoing doubts that tugged Jake back into despair. "No!" Colin screamed, panic creeping into his voice as he struggled against the weight of impending doom. "We can't lose. Not now." The vortex seemed to pulse with amusement, expanding as it drew nearer, pulling at the remnants of their courage. Jake felt the pull of fear return, a creeping sensation that threatened to unravel everything they fought to keep alive. Then, a flicker of hope ignited in Jake's chest. At that moment, he understood the darkness might hold terrifying truths, but it could also reveal the strength born in the light of those fallen. The memories coursing through him weren't just shadows. They were life. "Remember them," he shouted, summoning every ounce of will he had left. "This is for them. We do this together." The energy surged again, amplifying his words as they transformed into a rallying cry, uniting the spectral fragments of souls and the fluttering flicker of hope. But as the Buzzsaw lunged one last time, fury etched on its face, Jake braced for impact. What more would they discover? Were the secrets buried in darkness the very keys to their survival? The fight wasn't over, but with the darkness closing in, they were just beginning to grasp the truth hidden beneath the surface. What lay at the heart of this struggle? And could they withstand the final revelation? The fire of the clash dimmed, replaced by a consuming darkness as the buzzsaw lunged. Jake's vision narrowed, the world now just a whirlwind of grotesque metal and shadows. The air crackled around him, a thick miasma of fear and despair gnawing at his senses, turning his heartbeat into a thunderous war drum. And that split second, time stretched. The memory of every laugh, every fear, surged through him. Faces that mattered, people he couldn't fail. He felt Colin's hand clasp his tightly, and it ignited something deep inside him, a fierce determination that pulsated like a heartbeat. "Now!" he shouted again, and without hesitation, they surged forward, the bonds of the past melding with the present. It was a reckless charge into the maw of chaos, but it was also a dance of desperation, a visceral leap that could spell their end or ignite their deliverance. The creature's blades whirred like monstrous wings, slicing through the air. Jake ducked just in time as a sharp edge whizzed above him. The air behind him sliced like a knife, and he could feel the heat of its wrath as it aimed for his back. For a moment, he felt untouchable, adrenaline surging through him like fire, propelling him forward. Colin's voice broke through the haze. "The spirits, they're still with us." Jake glanced back. The ethereal soldiers surged beside them, a shimmering wall of light that flickered and danced. Shadows clung to their forms, unwilling to let go. The sight drove Jake onward. This fight was for everyone who had fallen, for every life that had been snuffed out in darkness. "Fight!" Jake roared, channeling the collective cry of anger into his next shot. He fired again, the bullet arcing towards the buzzsaw. It struck the armor, resonating like a bell, but the creature seemed unfazed. Instead, it roared, blades twisting in a menacing spiral as it retaliated, sending a shockwave racing through the ground. The earth trembled violently, and an overwhelming force knocked Jake off his feet. He landed hard, the breath rushing from his lungs. All the energy sapped from him in an instant, resistance slipping like sand between his fingers. "Jake!" Colin's voice sliced through the haze. He was still standing. Jake struggled to his feet, legs trembling. The world spun, but he locked his eyes on Colin, drawing strength from his friend's unwavering resolve. "Get up. We need to move." But the buzzsaw pounced, its towering shape blotting out the dim light. Panic shot through Jake, darkness enveloping, choking, filled with the haunting whispers of the fallen. He could feel their fear, the inability to find peace, and it nearly brought him to his knees. Then something snapped inside him. He stood tall, drawing in a breath that tasted of smoke and ash. Together, he shouted once more, his voice amplified with renewed clarity. For those who can't fight, the spectral soldiers surged forward, a radiant army in a moment of reckoning. Their unity sparked something within him. He felt an overwhelming wave of warmth, a beacon cutting through the icy tendrils of dread wrapping around him. With that surge, hope ignited like 1,000 suns. Jake gripped the Browning, readying for the all-important shot. Every ounce of will coursed through him, mingling with the spirit's cries, uniting them in purpose. Just as Jake took aim, the Buzzsaw stopped its advance, its monstrous face contorting into rage. "You think you can erase me?" it growled, the winds swirling with raw energy. The ground beneath their feet cracked, revealing a chasm that threatened to swallow everything whole. "No, we are not afraid of you," Colin's voice rang out defiantly, echoing in the darkness. It was the moment of truth. Jake's pulse raced, and he squeezed the trigger, channeling every ounce of pain, anger, and hope into that one shot. As the bullet flew, an explosion rocked the air, shaking the very core of their being. But just as the raw light erupted from the weapon, a shadow twisted and surged forward. The whispers grew frantic, a cacophony heralding either salvation or devastation. What would emerge from the clash of light and dark? Would it be the end of the struggle? Or would the darkness reveal a paralyzing truth that Jake and Colin were unprepared to face? Only time would tell. The thunderous explosion echoed through the air, a heartbeat of chaos. Jake's breath hung in the thick smoke like a forgotten promise. He fought the dizziness threatening to sweep him away. The world around him pulsed with darkness, illuminated only by flickers of the ethereal soldiers that rallied behind him, their forms glowing with a desperate, haunting light. "Jake!" Colin's voice broke through the haze again, pulling him from the edge. His friend's figure was blurred, a warrior amidst shadows. "Keep shooting." The tension clawed at Jake's throat. He aimed again, struggling to find the focus. The Buzzsaw was still there, roaring with fury, its machine-like voice vibrating through the ground. Dust and debris filled the air, making it hard to see. He felt the weight of the Browning in his hand, a cold reminder of responsibility, and steadied his trembling hands suddenly. The ground buckled like a disturbed beast beneath him, tossing him to the side. He landed hard, the sound of metal whirring close by sending icy dread racing through his veins. A scream broke through the noise, a thunderous cry of despair that belonged to no living creature. It solidified his purpose. He rolled sideways, barely avoiding deadly blades that sliced through the air. The Buzzsaw was winding up for another strike, a whirlwind of lethal precision. For a moment, time stilled as he locked eyes with the monster. Hatred spewed from its metallic visage, a twisted reflection of their own desperation. In that instant, clarity struck Jake. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a reckoning for every soul lost to tyranny. For they can't fight. Tormented memories flooded his mind, friends, family, innocence crushed by the weight of war. Together, he shouted again. With a determined pulse, he rose to his feet, new belief surging through him. The spirits surged once more, surrounding them like a protective shield in defiance of the encroaching darkness. Their whispers grew louder, blending with Colin's battle cry, forging a path forward as the Buzzsaw charged. A final, desperate maneuver sparked within Jake. He looked toward Colin, their eyes meeting with understanding. Now or never, Jake pulled the trigger, unleashing the power of every life taken and every promise broken. The bullet tore through the air like a comet, trailing light and hope. It struck the Buzzsaw with a sound that shattered the nightmares circling above them, a violent explosion of energy. But as the light enveloped the creature, its roar transformed. Instead of crumbling, the Buzzsaw staggered back, its blades swirling with newfound ferocity, absorbing the light as if it were being fed. Panic gripped Jake's heart as he realized the monster was becoming stronger. "Shoot again," Colin cried, retreating as the ground beneath them buckled, cracks spreading like veins through the earth. Jake reloaded, shaking fingers working to keep pace with his racing mind. But every ounce of his passion met a void. How could they fend off a darkness that thrived on fear? Just as he aimed, a sudden silence fell over the battlefield. The buzzsaw hissed, and then it laughed a low, chilling sound that echoed in the air, sending shivers down his spine. Fools, it spat. You think hope can defeat despair? Another shockwave erupted, sweeping them off their feet and spinning Jake into a darkness thick enough to drown. Flashes of light danced above, as though the spirits were pleading, their voices merging into a symphony of anguish. Then, without warning, a blinding light burst through the abyss, illuminating the chaos with a brilliance that threatened to consume everything. But was it salvation or destruction? Could they truly face the creature's unholy fury? Or were they walking into a trap spun from threads of their deepest fears? In that moment, everything hung in the balance, and the answer seemed just beyond their grasp. What unfathomable choice lay ahead for Jake and Colin? Would they succumb to the shadows, or blaze a new path through the darkness? The revelation awaited them just beyond the flickering light. The light blazed brighter, illuminating the chaos that hung like a shroud over the battlefield. Jake squinted, trying to remember who he was amongst the swirling nightmare. It was a fight not just for survival, but for the very essence of every being trapped within this nightmare. Get up, Colin's voice rang out, fierce and unwavering despite the chaos. We're not done yet. Jake pushed himself to move, the heat of resolve coursing in his veins again. He had to fight not just for their lives, but for the lives they lost, the brothers and sisters whose faces blurred into ghosts, whispering words of encouragement around him. Each heartbeat echoed like a rallying cry, drawing strength from the swirling unity of spirits. Together, Jake shouted, aiming the Browning again, heart racing as the world around them trembled with anticipation. Before the buzzsaw could even rev its merciless blades, he pulled the trigger. This time it felt different, less like a desperate attempt, more like an act of defiance. The bullet shot forth, slicing through the air with an intensity born from both pain and hope. The shot struck the creature head-on, exploding into a kaleidoscope of light. The sound of shattering metal and a deafening roar filled the air, a horrid caterwaul of rage. The buzzsaw staggered backward, unmoored, struggling against the brilliance that pushed against its darkness. Shadows displaced by radiance reformed, threatening Jake and Colin with despair's malicious echo. The spirits surged, feeding off the light, enveloping both Jake and Colin in a warm embrace that ignited their valor. With renewed force, the spectral soldiers rallied, creating a barrier against the encroaching darkness. We fight for you, they seemed to shout, faces shifting to look like their fallen comrades. A haunting reminder of what they stood to reclaim. Colin's eyes blazed fiercely beside Jake. Keep moving. Don't let up. The two charged, side by side, launching into the heart of the chaos, propelled by every laugh, every moment of joy they had fought for. Jake felt the weight of the Browning comfort his grip, not just a weapon but a lifeline tethering him to everything worth fighting for. The buzzsaw roared again, but this time it was different, its tone mixing fury with something that resembled fear. Unable to absorb more light, it reeled back, clashing against the dunes of power forged by collective memories and united spirits. Now, Jake urged, feeling the spirit's desperate energy flow through him. Together, they aimed their fire, aware that this could be their final shot, destined either for triumph or tragedy. The round they unleashed shattered the tension in a brilliant explosion, a blazing light cascading through the fog in a shockwave that banished despair. The very earth under their feet groaned, shaking as the buzzsaw's form flickered, gasping against the invincible tide pushing it back. Then came the moment of realization. The darkness surrounding the buzzsaw was what truly fed it. It thrived on the hopelessness that cowered within them. And now, after a lifetime spent in shadow, Jake and Colin had finally found a way to make the darkness scream in terror instead. With an almost triumphant howl, the buzzsaw began to splinter, shards of shadowy metal collapsing under the weight of light. The specters, once shackled to their misery, broke free from the chains of despair, drawing strength from the moment as they crowded around the men. "It's working," Colin shouted, the joy palpable, a fire igniting in his eyes. "We did it, Jake." The very entity that had held dominion over them, the fear, the doubt, the horror began to dissolve, swallowing itself in its futile struggle against light. But just as the darkness seemed to yield, it let out one last scream, a grotesque warning that rumbled through the very earth they stood on. Fools! You think you've won? This is only the beginning. Jake felt the ground buckle beneath him. The world spun as the shadows writhed and twisted, trying to reclaim their stony hold. But anger surged through him at the thought of succumbing once more. He doubled his grip on the Browning and raised it high, channeling every ounce of fury he had, every lost dream, every unvoiced scream. Together, he howled, shoulders squared against the vastness of despair. We won. Stand down. With a final act of defiance, he pulled the trigger, sending forth a volley of bullets into the writhing mass of darkness that threatened to consume everything. Light burst forth, reaching out like hands grasping for freedom. The shadows screamed, shrieked, and recoiled, finally scattered like smoke on the wind, chased by the relentless light. In that moment, the night sky itself seemed to settle, the moon shining down like a watchful guardian, calm after the storm of chaos had erupted. Jake looked to Colin, breathless but triumphant, and saw in his eyes the confirmation of what they had accomplished. "We did it," Colin gasped, his voice catching in disbelief. As the remnants of the fog began to clear, a semblance of peace washed over them. In the cool, crisp air, the whispers of the fallen became soothing, echoing their gratitude for a fight not just won, but remembered. The battlefield transformed, the sense of despair left like a bad dream. As daybreak approached, Jake took a deep breath, feeling lighter, freed from the weight of fear. Each man stood together, the bonds forged in the fire of their dark night, the secrets of the past transformed into a promise of hope. They had conquered the darkness not just in battle but within themselves. "Come on," Colin nudged. "Let us go home." Hand in hand with courage, the two men stepped forward into the dawn, into a future they would carve anew. Now, if there's one thing to take from this, it's that the power of light lies in unity, even in the darkest of hours. You need to subscribe now to catch our next exclusive story, so don't miss out. Smash that like button right now. It makes a huge difference for the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about the ending. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this incredible tale unfolds. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel.